Hi, and welcome back to, what did we call this?
Daily Devotions with Dad.
Daily Devotions with Dad. That's right. I'm back with
Philip.
He's Philip, and I'm Seth, or Dad. He's God, and we're
Not.
or at least part of Not, right? That's what we're doing. Our whole family, we call ourselves Not because it helps us to remember that only God gets to be God.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You don't get to be God.
Yeah, Satan can't be God.
Satan can't be God, that's right. And that's important.
And he used to be an angel, but he wanted to be like God. Sunday school.
That was very good. So you say Satan used to be an angel. Isn't he still an angel?
No.
He's a fallen angel, but he's still, it's not like he's not an angel anymore. He's just not one of God's angels. I mean, he is one of God's angels, but he's fallen, so he's right?
Yeah.
Anyway, today we're going to do another devotion from the from Days of Praise, which is put out by the Institute for Creation Research. You can find out more about them at icr.org. They've graciously allowed us to use these for our devotion time. We are working with messages from the Messiah's life, and today we're going to be talking about something that's recorded in the book of Mark, chapter 6 and verse 48. Philip, do you want to read that for us?
Sure. And he saw them toiling in the rowing, for the wind was contrary unto them. Contrary unto them. And about the fourth watch of the night he cometh unto them, walking upon the sea, and would have passed by them.
Where's it from?
Mark 6:48.
Mark 6:48. That's right. Good job. No, shaking. There we go. Have you heard this story before?
No.
You've never talked about this story? With Jesus is walking on the water?
No.
Can you walk on water?
No.
I can't either.
We can walk on frozen water.
We can walk on frozen water, but the Sea of Galilee wouldn't have been frozen. Well, let's see what Dr. Morris has to say. It says, right after feeding the 5,000, just outside Capernaum, Jesus remained behind to pray while his disciples crossed the Sea of Galilee at night. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and John all record some details of this event. So 3 books of the Bible talk about it.
Matthew, Mark, and John.
That's what I just said.
I know.
After the disciples had gotten about 25 or 30 furlongs across the sea, which would have been about halfway, the sea arose by reason of a great wind that blew, is what the Gospel of John says. So there's a little bit of a storm going on, right?
Yeah.
And somewhere between 3 and 6 in the morning, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. So 3 o'clock in the morning, it's pretty dark.
3 o'clock?
Yeah, between 3 and 6 in the morning, he went walking out to them. So it was pretty dark, and there was a great wind, and so the sea was all frothy and stuff like that. And what would you think if you were on a boat and you looked out? You woke up and looked out a window, or you looked over the ledge, and there was a guy walking out on the water?
I would probably freak out.
That'd be a little freaky, wouldn't it? When the disciples saw him, the Bible says they were troubled, saying, "It's a spirit," and they cried out in fear. So, like you said, they were a little freaked out.
I don't think I said that.
You did. You said I would be a little freaked out.
Oh.
Didn't you say that?
Yeah.
No, you did say that. So the disciples were, and they started crying out, "Hey, it's a ghost," or something like that. But Jesus talked with them, it says in the book of Mark again, and says unto them, "Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid." So Jesus says, "Hey, it's okay, it's me."
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out that if I were in a boat and I saw somebody walking on the water, and what if it was you, right? And you called out, "It's okay, Dad, it's me." But that wouldn't be any better, because I'd be like, "You're going to sink in the water," but Jesus is walking on the water. And Jesus gets to walk on the water. Why?
Because he's God's son.
Mm-hmm. And he's also
Jesus Christ.
Which, you're Philip, I'm Dad, he's God.
And we're not?
We're not, except Jesus is God. Right? So he gets to walk on the water. So Peter asked Jesus if he could. Peter asked to join Jesus on the water and stepped out. When he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, "Lord, save me." So Peter sees Jesus out there. Jesus says, "Don't be afraid, it's me." So Peter climbs out of the boat and starts to walk out towards Jesus on the water. That's kind of crazy.
He was walking on the water?
He was, but then he saw that the wind was all boisterous, it says, and he got to be afraid, so he started to sink. So he was walking on the water, and then he started to sink. It says, when Jesus brought Peter into the boat, the wind ceased, and they were sore amazed in themselves beyond measure and wondered, for they considered not the miracle of the loaves. They weren't thinking about, let me finish reading. They considered not the miracle of the loaves, for their heart was hardened. That's what Mark says. So think about it. They had just come. Do you remember the story of the feeding of the 5,000? I talked about this with Mom yesterday.
With a small lunch of a small boy?
Yeah, he had 5 loaves and 2 fish, and they fed 5,000 people. And they had 12 baskets of food left over. That is pretty incredible. The disciples had just fed all these people with just one boy's small lunch, right? And Mark records, they considered not the miracle of the loaves. They had just left. And this miracle of the loaves, you can't kick the desk. It shakes the camera.
Sorry.
They didn't even think about the fact, but their heart was hardened. So it's like they saw this miracle where Jesus, actually, he created food out of nothing, right? That's one of the creation miracles of Christ, where he actually showed himself to be the creator. But they didn't think about that. I mean, if you can create fish and create bread out of nothing to feed 5,000 people, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal to walk on water, does it? Because if you're the creator, then you can make anything happen, right? Jesus said gently to them, "It is I, be not afraid." And then they willingly received him into the ship, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. So they get Jesus into the boat. He says, "Hey, it's me, don't be afraid." So they were like, "Oh, good, we're glad it's you." And then they got to where they were going, and the storm ceased and all that. This event, it says, displays Christ's omnipotence by the way he ignored gravity, because you know what gravity is?
Yeah.
Gravity is the force that pulls us. It makes us, when you jump up, it makes you come back down.
It pushes us
Down, right. Well, really, I think it pulls more. But. So when you're walking on water, it should pull you under, right?
Yeah.
It should pull you under. But Christ ignored the gravity. He immediately stopped the wind and waves and instantaneously transported the ship to shore from the middle of the Sea of Galilee. Because it says that when they willingly received him into the ship, immediately the ship was at the land where they were going. Now, so it's the middle of the night. They're halfway across the lake. They see Jesus walking on the water. They're a little freaked out by it, right? Peter says, well, Jesus says, "Don't worry, it's me." Peter's like, "Oh, hey, it's Jesus. I'm going to go meet him. I'm going to jump out on the water too." I'm not sure I could do that. Could you do that?
No.
No, I don't think so either. So he runs out, starts to go over to Jesus, but he gets a little weird about all the waves and the wind, and he starts to sink, and Jesus picks him and lifts him up and takes him, and they get in the boat. And when they get in the boat, boom, they're where they were supposed to be going.
So, like, he was just pulling them?
No, he wasn't pulling them, but he, like, transported. They all got into the boat.
And then they just
and then,
teleported?
Boom, that's what it sounds like, because it says, and immediately the ship was at the land whither they went. So they immediately got to where they were going. This is one of those scriptures that when you dig into it and you look at the events and the details in the story, you've got Christ walking on water, ignoring gravity, changing the surface tension, meaning, have you ever seen stuff float on water? Yeah, you've seen things floating. Yeah. Octonauts, maybe. But, Jesus doesn't he walks on the water. He's not sinking into the water. And then he gets this entire boat and ship safe from the wind. The wind stops. And And then when he gets in the boat and they say, "Oh, hey, it's you. Good, we're glad." Boom! Immediately they were where they were going. So this story really shows that Jesus is God. He's able to do all of those things, none of which we can do, because he's God and
we're not.
We're not. You had never heard that story before?
What story?
About Jesus walking on the water?
No.
Well, what do you think about that story?
It's crazy.
Crazy? Why is it crazy?
Because Peter walked on the water.
Do you think Peter walked on the water because Peter could walk on water?
No, because he wanted to meet Jesus.
But if you wanted to meet Jesus, could you walk on water?
No.
Probably not.
I would be too afraid to try. Even try.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point, right? Because it takes a lot of faith, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It would take a lot of faith to step out of the boat.
And onto the water.
And onto the sea, right? I mean, and there's waves and all that stuff. But Peter had enough faith to step out onto the water. And he apparently was at least able to take a couple steps before his fear overtook him. And when his fear overtook him, he began to sink down. Jesus rescued him and put him back in the boat. Come back up. So that's a really good story. It's amazing. It's one of those things. It's interesting to me that the disciples, they had just participated in this feeding of the 5,000. They had just been a part of. I was telling Mom yesterday, how many disciples were there?
I don't know.
You don't remember how many disciples there were? There are 12.
Yeah.
Do you remember
But one betrayed them.
I know, but we're not there yet. That didn't happen for a little while. But do you remember how much food the little boy had?
2 loaves of bread and 12 fish.
He actually had 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. Okay, but how many things is that? 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish.
My age, 100. 7.
7. 1 under your age. So there's 12 disciples and there are 7 things. So let's say you're in line, right? And Jesus is passing out. He's giving everybody a loaf of bread, right? So he gives out 5 loaves of bread and he gives out 2 fish, right? And you're next in line. What's he going to give you?
I don't know.
Well,
more of that?
Well, but he had 5 loaves and he had 2 fish, and he gave all the other disciples, he gave the other 7, the first 7 in line got a loaf of bread or a fish. So what's the 8th person get? He got a loaf of bread too. And that's where the miracle is, because Jesus is creating out of nothing, right? So the disciples are participating. They've got to imagine, and then they start handing the food out, and it's like no matter how much bread and fish they're giving out to people, they still have more.
Yeah, maybe the disciples were looking at Jesus making that food, and it's like, whoa.
Whoa, but that. Okay, but this is what's weird. That night they got in a boat to cross the sea, and Jesus came walking out on the water, and they didn't even think about the loaves and the fish. They didn't even think about this Jesus just created all of this food out of nothing to give all these people. They didn't even think that somebody who could create like that could also control the creation. Anyway, it's one of those things that shows how hard it is for us to believe sometimes, right? Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this again with me.
Yep.
Did you have fun?
Yeah.
Did you have anything you wanted to say? You said something last time I thought was really impressive.
I mean, that it was actually impressive.
It was. Do you want to say anything to people? Thank them for coming? Maybe ask them to subscribe to our channel. Why don't you go ahead and ask them?
If you liked it, you can subscribe and you can watch our other videos. But we might make more today, so you have another to watch.
Hopefully.
Others.
Yeah. Well, thanks very much. Again, thank you for joining us for Daily Devotions with Dad, and sometimes Mom, and sometimes Philip. Okay, that's enough. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Dad.
And I'm Philip.
And He's God, and we're not. Thanks.
We're not.